Hey everybody, it's Mike and welcome to Chip Damage, and today we're talking fighting games. So if you've seen any of my other videos discussing game collecting, unboxing, or game discussion, you may have gathered that I'm a pretty big fighting game fan. And yeah, while it's impossible for me to say what my favorite genre of video game is, I like too much stuff, I can say I've probably put the most overall time into fighting games. And that's for a few kind of particular and lucky reasons. I was introduced very early in life to fighting games, and I was lucky enough to have friends that lived near me that also enjoyed them. And I was also lucky to encounter new friends while growing up that also liked fighting games. From elementary school through college through my adult life, I have encountered many fighting game fans from many different walks of life. And one of my favorite things to do is to have them come over in person and just play a few rounds. I can't tell you how many weekend nights I have enjoyed just like starting at 8 p.m. with a few fighters, like, oh yeah, we'll go a few rounds, and then realize the sun is coming up. And that is my favorite thing to do. I love playing online, and that's the way of the future, and that's the way you get the most rounds in practice. But I just love having a few buddies come over and pass the controller. And you know what? I've been very fortunate to have that in my life. So what I want to do on this channel is talk about my favorite fighting games, and that's what we're going to be doing today. Today I'm going to talk about my top 10 fighting games, and please, I'm human. This is a nebulous list. This was very hard to make, very hard to whittle down to just 10 titles because I like almost all fighting games. You name a big fighting game franchise, I probably have a history with it, and I like it. From Mortal Kombat to Dead or Alive, BlazBlue, Guilty Gear, of course all the SNK and Capcom fighters. I really do like most of these. I do have my preferences, as you'll see as we go through this list, but this was incredibly hard for me to whittle down. And there were a few criteria that I used to kind of help me with that process. Number one, I cut out arena fighters. While I love arena fighters like the Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm games or the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure game or Kill la Kill game, I kind of separated that just to kind of trim down their list because those are kind of different and they're almost like a subcategory of fighting game onto themselves. And while I fully respect them and enjoy them, I kind of wanted to keep this to a bit more of a traditional fighting game mode, like kind of in that vein. And number two, I kind of realized that the best way for me to do this was to pick my favorite fighting games. Not the most technically, deep or the ones that are, considered the most skill-based because you know what? I'm not a professional player. So what I decided to do was just the ones that when I come home after a long day and I want to hang out with some buddies, what do I want to play? What's the easiest thing for me to just pop in and play and have a great time? Whether I want to play competitively or not, what's just the easiest thing to just pop on and have a great time with? And that's how I went. And please, if you don't see one of your favorite fighting games in this list, please tell me about it in the comments. I want to discuss it. And we're going to be doing more fighting game videos, including my fighting game personal history, because I have quite a long history with it. We're going to be doing other videos about particular series of fighting games. We're going to be going over all types of stuff like that. I may do another top list soon in the future. But for today, let's get it started without any further ado with my top 10 fighting games. Please let me know what you think of each of these. So let's begin. As you guys may have known from some of my other videos, I love the Dreamcast. The Dreamcast was home to many fantastic fighting games, especially from Capcom. There was kind of a Capcom arcade machine, and my number 10 favorite is one of those titles, and that is Project Justice, which is the sequel to this game here, Rival Schools. So you can call Project Justice Rival Schools too. Now, this is a very sought-after title on the Dreamcast. It's decently rare. It came out late in the Dreamcast life, so it's kind of hard to get your hands on this one legitimately, but I was lucky enough to. And I must say, this game is just about hype and fun. And I think that's what most of the fighting games on this list are all about. This is a game about a bunch of hot-blooded high schoolers, ostensibly set in the Street Fighter universe, that just beat the tar out of each other using energy blasts and Street Fighter inputs like fiery uppercuts. And it just has so much personality. Like the stages are great. You fight like in a gymnasium or in a volleyball field, and they're all like oversized. And, you have just stereotypes of various high school like types of kids. Like you have your jocks, your nerds, your like head of the photography club, and then you have Nagare, the head of the swim club. If you know, you know. I've mentioned that before. He is one of my favorite fighting game characters of all time. Yeah, so this is a I would say 3D fighter. There's a sidestep, but you still mostly fight in a 2D plane. You kind of lock onto one another, and it's a Unlike the original Rival Schools, this is a team-based game that is 3v3 as opposed to the 2v2 of the original Rival Schools, and it's just a blast. The music's hype, the music's hype. Like, one of my favorite music tracks is Tayo Rooftop Music. It's kind of synonymous with Batu and his theme as well. Like, this game just has energy, hot-blooded, burning vigor. Please check it out if you can. If you can't get it legitimately, I can't encourage piracy, but please, any way you can, play this game, Project Justice, also known as Rival Schools 2, on the Sega Dreamcast. So, and let's hope for a re-release of that one, because the prices on that are insane. But moving on, jump into Capcom's #1 rival company in the Japanese kind of fighting game scene, and that is SNK. So, I have a pretty long history with SNK, so this was hard to narrow down. And we're going to be looking at the Samurai Showdown series of games. This was very hard for me because I really wanted to go with Samurai Showdown 2019. I think this is a fantastic game. I think this was a great revival. It's one of my favorite modern-day fighting games. But it's not complete yet. There's still DLC coming out, and it really hasn't sunk in. You know, time has... it needs to kind of get a little longer in the tooth for me to really judge where this ranks. My favorite Samurai Showdown game is actually the Neo Geo Pocket Color version of Samurai Showdown 2. Yes. So, if you don't know, you should. Neo Geo Pocket Color is a fun little handheld that SNK released back in 1999. If you don't know about it, I made a video all about it. Please check it out. And just knowing SNK, of course they put some of their best fighters on that console. And there's many of them. And they're currently being re-released on the Nintendo Switch, which I cannot believe because this was a very niche game on a very niche console. So if you want to check this out, check it out on there. But what is this? This is a fantastic 2D fighting game. 8-bit, it's like high-end 8-bit. I wouldn't quite call it 16-bit Samurai Showdown game with all your favorite characters, all your favorite classic characters, plus a few new ones. And while there are many fighters on that console, including the original SNK vs. Capcom, there's something about the control and style of this game. This game is just, it feels good. The moves come out like when you want them to come out. There's a customizable system to it. Don't think gems from other fighting games. Like, when I say customization, the game is fully functional without them, but you can equip like higher health or a new special move or a new super move to your characters. But even if you don't touch that stuff, there is a solid, deep fighting game here with just amazing music and really charming visuals. I love this. It's my favorite Samurai Showdown games, and it's my #9 favorite fighting game, Samurai Showdown 2 Pocket on the Neo Geo Color. Please check it out. But don't sleep on Samurai Showdown 2019 if you haven't. I don't think this game gets enough love in the greater fighting game scene. Both great, but moving along. So, on to #8. We're switching over to Arc System Works, seminal classic. We're talking about Guilty Gear, and we're talking about my favorite Guilty Gear. That is Guilty Gear Accent Core Plus. Yes. And the version that you see here in front of you is not the most recent version of this game. The most recent version of this game is strangely only on the Nintendo Switch. There were versions released on the Xbox 360 and the PS3 called Guilty Gear XX Accent Core Plus R for revision. That's an HD version of these titles. Unfortunately, they were not released physically in the United States. The last version released physically are the ones I'm holding, the PS2 and PSP versions. But if you want a modern day version, you can check them out on the Switch, 360, PS3. It's all fantastic. I think the Switch version has a bonus soundtrack too from the Korean version of the game. But regardless, why is this my #8, and why do I choose this Guilty Gear out of the series? Well, this is the one I have the most time with. Guilty Gear, the most recent one, the Rev 2, fantastic. I have nothing against the newest Guilty Gear game, and we are still waiting on Guilty Gear Strive, which I'm super excited for. But unfortunately, I did not get as much time with Rev 2 as I wanted. And I must say, that game is beautiful and fantastic. But this game just nailed it. I love the roster. I believe there's 25 characters in this. They included boss characters like Cliff and Justice. It just had all the characters were cool. You know, if you don't know about Guilty Gear, it's like this insane anime meets Western American rock collaboration. The soundtrack is all heavy metal and really fantastic. The game is fast. It's deep. This is one of the harder fighting games to kind of wrap your head around, as a series, not just this game in particular, but Guilty Gear is known for its depth. But it doesn't matter. I pop this in, I'm like, yo, this looks good, it sounds good, and the hits are snappy. When you hit someone in this, you really feel it, and it's fantastic. This game in particular, so many nights, on the PS2, playing this with buddies. You know, I'm a May main with a backup Soul, just for so you guys know. But I love so many characters. I can play Axel or Amelia, and it's just fun to try because there's no clones in this game. Like, this game is not a Capcom game where, like, there's that general template of, you know, like there's many Shotos and they kind of all branch off of that. Like, while there are Shotos in this, you can call Soul a pseudo Shoto. There's such a diversity in the roster. Like, it's 25, which is a decent sized roster, but everyone's just like this wonderful weirdo, and it's all set with these beautiful sprites that still hold up today, and I can't wait for that new Guilty Gear. I still need some more time in Rev 2, but when I think Guilty Gear, this is the game that comes to mind. Check it out on all those systems, but if you want a hard copy, you can still get it on the PS2 and PSP. Also, there was a limited version, first print run of the PS2 version for my collectors out there that came with a CD soundtrack, which is just phenomenal. This game is over 12 years old. I still listen to this soundtrack all the time. If you can't get this, download it, get it any way you can. If you don't play the game, at least listen to the music. That's Guilty Gear, XX, Accent Core, Plus, and the R versions on HD consoles. Check it out, Guilty Gear. Love it. God. So, moving along to our number 7. We're going back to SNK, and this was another tough one. We're looking at the King of Fighters series. Now, if you're a fighting game fan, you know how many great King of Fighters games there were. They were coming out yearly for so long, and everyone has their favorites, and this one's mine. I don't think it may be the deepest or most like technically proficient, but this is the one I pop in all the time whenever I have a few buddies over who want to get some KOF in, and that is the King of Fighters 98 Ultimate Match. Yes, this was super difficult to decide between this, KOF 13, and KOF 2002. And what you see in front of you is the 2008 PS2 release that I still have sealed. That includes the bonus discs for like soundtrack and the making of the game and all that. You can download this game on the Xbox 360, on the PS4. This game is available everywhere. Please check it out. What I also have here are the limited run prints of the physical version of the PS4 version. It was not released physically in a wide release in the United States on PS4, so you had to get it through Limited Run Games, who I have a whole video on if you want to know more about them. They're fantastic. I had to get 2 versions of it. I wanted the Neo Geo box, and I wanted the regular PS4 release because I love this game. Why did I choose this one? What is this game? Well, KOF 98 is the, I believe, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98. It's the 5th main KOF game, kind of redone. So there was a regular KOF 98. Ultimate Match came out 10 years later, and what it kind of is a mix of all those games from 94 to 98. It kind of brings everything together in a non-canon dream match with like a ton of characters. I believe it says it right here. There are 64 characters if you count like the alt versions of them. That's insane, with a ton of great stages that you can switch between 2D version and 3D versions of. It's just all of those brought together. Now, so is KOF 2002, but for a different era. Why did I pick 98? There's just something about like the gritty 98-ness of this. Like, this game just has like, it screams the 90s. 2002 is more of like an early 2000s, kind of like techno-y, like some of the characters like K-Dash, like they have more of like a Matrix era type of look. And while it's great, I love 2002. This is what I think of when I think of KOF. And don't get me wrong, KOF 13 plays better than this game in many aspects, and it is the best looking 2D sprite game like ever. But it has a limited roster, and I can't get as much playtime out of it as I want. When I can play and love most of the characters in this game. And this has Wolfgang Krauser, and those other games don't. And Krauser is one of my favorite characters. He's a big, purple-haired Hulk Hogan guy from Germany, if you don't know. He'll chisel your grave. If you know, you know. But yeah, this game has all the favorites. Iori, Kyo, Terry, Geese, Andy, Leonia. Like, I love this game. I love its soundtrack. Please check it out. It's available literally everywhere. KOF 98 Ultimate Match. Love this game. So, as a side note, another reason, one of the splitting hairs between this, me picking this over KOF 13, is that Terry Bogard, who is my main, does not have Power Dunk in KOF 13. That is that game's like only flaw with Terry. Power Dunk is like my favorite special move. Very satisfying. Does the knee to the punch. So happy to see that coming back in KOF 15. So, moving along to our number 6 game, and we're getting close. We're getting into like some games near and dear to my heart. If you couldn't tell by this piece of marketing that I had signed by the director, I love Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, and that is the game we are talking about now for number 6, and that is Tatsunoko versus Capcom Ultimate All-Stars Edition particularly, but there is a Japanese version that I also have here called Cross Generation of Heroes, and I have a signed version. Same guy who signed this, Ryona Natsuma, the director. Nice guy. Got it signed in New York City in 2011. But what is Tatsunoko versus Capcom? Tatsunoko versus Capcom is the most underrated versus title, versus being the Marvel vs. Capcom series or the SNK vs. Capcom series. Yeah, well, instead of doing that, on the Wii in around 2008, Capcom decided to team up with anime legend company Tatsunoko to make a homegrown fighting game, pitting Japanese anime superheroes against their own Capcom heroes. It was a wacky idea, and it worked. This game came out in 2008 in Japan, and just as a brief personal history, I had a friend who imported this game while we were in college, and we never thought this would come to the US. It was insane. It had all these anime characters that were all licensed out to different distributors in the United States. We're like, yeah, this is going to be relegated to an import, and we loved it. We played so many nights. I lost so much sleep and was late to so many classes because of this game. And then 2 years later, lo and behold, this game got a United States release. I could not believe it. It took a while, but it was totally worth it. The United States version has 5 bonus characters that were not in the original Japanese version. And it had online play on the Wii in 2010. And guess what? It was okay. It kind of worked. It worked well enough. The Wii was not exactly an online powerhouse, but I got some fun weekends out of this. And online, but to this day, I love this game, and I don't think it's ever going to get a re-release because of said distributors, but it's worth your time. Think of Marvel vs. Capcom 1, slightly smaller roster than something like MVC2 or CVS2, but it also has 2-on-2 gameplay as opposed to 3-on-3. But the energy in this game, the music, the character roster, the Capcom side, for my Capcom fans out there, it has some deep cuts that you didn't see in some of the MVC, CVS games. This game had like a character from Onimusha 4, Soki. It had that like gun girl assist, Saki from Quiz Nario Dreams, I believe, is in the game. Like that girl that just pops in MVC1 as an assist. This was the first fighting game that Beautiful Joe showed up in. You had Batu from Rival Schools, and I believe his last playable appearance. You had Alex from Street Fighter 3. The roster was great. And yeah, I didn't know many of the characters on the Tatsunoko side. I knew like Battle of the Planets, and I'd just seen a Cross movie at the time. But that made it like more, I don't know, that mysterious kind of arcadey feel when you just kind of walk by a game and you see some crazy characters doing some crazy moves. Like, hey, let me try that. It gave me that sense. I didn't know who any of those characters were, but they were so much fun to play. Shout out to Tekken Man and Tekken Man Blade, the best characters for me on the Tatsunoko side. But please, if you want high damage, super combos, flashy animations, awesome characters, and just like a weird, fantastic, very Japanese, very like old school Japanese flair, check out Tatsunoko versus Capcom, particularly the US version, so you can get those 5 bonus characters. Can I name them off the top of my head? Let me see. It's Frank West from Dead Rising. It's Zero from Mega Man. And on the Tatsunoko side, you got Joe the Condor from Battle of the Planets and Yatterman 2, as well as they replaced a kind of silly character from the Japanese version called Hakushin, the Japanese character, Genie, with, I believe it is Tekken Man Blade. Yes. So it is, you got 5 bonus characters. You lost one from the Japanese one, but trust me, he was no big loss. Get the American version so you can get those 5 new characters. But if I have to say one good thing about the Japanese one, if you want both, when you tag a character in and out in the American version, the theme will change to that character. So that was kind of cool. But the music in the American version is also fantastic. But yeah, I can spiel about this game for hours. Hunt this one down before it gets too rare. It's not getting re-released. That's Tatsunoko versus Capcom on the Wii. God, I love that game. So, moving on, we're going to take a quick intermission between 6 and 5 because I just want to mention something because I wanted to put this game on the list, but I could see it as a controversial pick. I wouldn't know where to place it because it's still a new game that still has DLC coming out, but I just wanted to talk about Smash Brothers real quick. So yes, particularly Smash Brothers Ultimate. There is some debate, if you don't know, if this is a fighting game. Should it be counted with other fighting games because the community is very different, the gameplay is very different than most traditional fighting games. However, yes, I understand that the communities are incredibly different, and sometimes they clash. There's not a lot of overlap, but I want to talk about how much fun this game is and how important it is very quickly. This game is a ton of fun. It has like 90 stages, and as a game collector, the fact of the matter is that I can play as Donkey Kong and beat up Bayonetta if I want is just, you can't overestimate that. The fact that so many games that I love come together in this game, it can't be overwhelmed. You can play as Ken versus Terry Bogard for the first time since Capcom versus SNK 2 almost 2 decades earlier in this game. It has music from those fighting games. It has music from every franchise from which a character originates in this. This is worth your time. And my 2 cents on whether it's a fighting game or not, yes, with a caveat, is I think Smash Brothers is a broader game. It is a game that you can enter and either go into party game mode or fighting game mode. You can go into super silly, non-competitive items on 4-player, 8-player, like party mode, or you can go on like Final Destination 1v1, like competitive mode. So yes, I do think it is a fighting game when it wants to be, when you set it up to be. And sure, it controls totally different than most fighting games, but they probably said that about 3D fighting games versus 2D fighting games. They control very differently, but there's no debate whether Tekken is a fighting game or Street Fighter is a fighting game. They play totally differently, but they're both fighting games. So I think Smash is a fighting game with a party game mode. Love it. You could be Terry versus Ken and Ryu in this game. You can't say anything bad about it. I just wanted to put my 2 cents in this. I've wasted a lot of time in this game over the last 2 years, and I've loved it. I was one of the first people in North America to play this game at E3 2018. And since that moment, I've loved it and played it regularly whenever I have a group of people over who just want some fun. But yeah, Smash Brothers Ultimate. Not my number 5, but a quick intermission that I just wanted to bring up. And I want your comments on that. I want you guys to let me know, what do you think of Smash amongst the fighting game community in general? I want you to comment on all these games. I wanted a discussion here, but I just wanted to bring that up. And without further ado, let's get into our top 5. This was really hard to order. I'd say other than number 1, this could be kind of nebulous depending on my mood. I can swap these back and forth, but in general, these are my 5 favorite fighting games of all time. So let's start with number 5, and this may be shocking to most fans, but don't turn off the video if you don't like this choice, because like I said, this is a little nebulous. I could switch this with number 4 on occasion, and that is the seminal classic, the undebatable GOAT of 2D fighting games in many respects, and that is Street Fighter Third Strike, Fight for the Future. Yes, I love this game. If you are a fighting game fan, you know what this is. So, what am I holding here? This is the original home port on the Dreamcast for Street Fighter 3, and I also have here the PS2 and Xbox port of the game that was released along with Hyper Street Fighter 2. There's a couple physical options for this game. It was also recently released on the PS4 and Xbox One as part of the Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection. However, most hardcore fans like myself prefer the Xbox 360 and PS3 downloadable version of this game, the Third Strike Online as it's most known. There's no physical for that version, unfortunately, so it is locked digitally, which I hate, but I would recommend that version, but these are all great. I'm not a pro. I can't count frames. I can't see 2, 3, 4 frames of difference. I mean, I can feel a little bit of difference between them, but all these games are great. I grew up playing the Dreamcast version, which most people say isn't the best, but any version of this game you're going to love. What is this? This is, of course, the 1999 third version of Street Fighter 3 that added more characters than the prior 2 versions. It has some of the best 2D sprite animation ever to this day. This game is 22 years old at this recording, and it is still one of the most stylish looking games ever. The soundtrack is fantastic. It has a very hip-hop urban theme, which I just love. Some of those beats get stuck in your head. Speaking of which, Beats in My Head reminds me of my main in this game, Elena, one of my favorite Street Fighter characters, a lover. All the characters are wonderful weirdos. Most people who are more familiar with the other traditional Street Fighters may approach it and say, who are these guys? Like, I see Ryu, Ken, Chun-Li, and Akuma, but who else are these freaks? Those freaks are fantastic. Everybody from like Dudley to Yin and Yang, 12, Necro, Oro, Gil, Urian. Small roster, I believe 18 or 19 characters counting Gil, the secret boss, but still, all of them are unique and fantastic. That game just has a good, when you smack someone in Street Fighter 3, you really feel it. Like the hits feel good. Of course, you have the legendary parry system, which is like the, the ballsiest move in fighting game, like kind of history, like a defensive option where if you tap forward at the last moment before a hit kind of reaches you, you get frame advantage by kind of slapping that attack aside. It's really tricky, but it's so stylish. Yeah, Street Fighter 3, for such a game with such a small roster, you could dump hours into and keep learning new things, new combos, and just have a great time. Street Fighter 3, I have nothing bad to say about this. This is my number 5 in this list, but like I said, that could change depending on my mood. But I'll never, if someone says, hey, this game is my favorite fighting game of all time, I can't argue with them. It's like if they say it's the best fighting game of all time, I can't argue with them. And I'm going to say that about all the preceding titles, because this is a classic forever. Please bring Third Strike Online Edition to future generations. Capcom, please re-release that version. You can't beat that version. But Street Fighter 3, Third Strike, Fight for the Future. Please check it out. Man, I love this game. All right. Moving on to number 4. This was a tough one. I really debated between this and Third Strike, but we are talking about Capcom versus SNK 2 Match of the Millennium. Yes, so what you see here are 2 versions of this classic released, I believe, in 2001. That is the PlayStation 2 version and the Xbox EO version. There's also a GameCube EO version, and this game was also released on the PlayStation 3 digital store. Differences between the two. There are some slight balance tweaks in the Xbox version. There was also online play in that version, which has, of course, been discontinued, as well as the EO mode, which is advertised on the cover. When you play the game, you can either play in traditional fighting game mode or EO mode, which is easy operation. That's what that stands for, where you kind of just do special moves at the flip of the right stick. Like, you can just do any big fancy move you want. It's more of like a funny, pass the time and laugh at it mode where you're just shooting off specials and supers all the time. If I'm not mistaken, the GameCube version only has that mode. I don't have that version myself, but I read it's not preferable because you cannot play it in a traditional mode. Please let me know if I'm wrong in the comments, because these games are getting kind of hard to find, and I'm wondering if I snatch up that GameCube version just so I can have all 3. But yes, Capcom versus SNK 2. What is this game? Well, this is actually the, if you want to count it, 4th game in the SNK series versus Capcom. Following SNK vs. Capcom on the Neo Geo Pocket, SNK vs. Capcom SVC Chaos on the original Xbox, and Capcom vs. SNK 1 on the Dreamcast and PS1. This game takes the 2 biggest and best Japanese 2D fighting game developers, Capcom and SNK, and pitches an all-star roster against each other. I believe it's 44 characters total, split down the middle. So, and it's 2D. It can be 1-on-1, 2v2, 3v3. You kind of set it yourself, called the ratio system. When you select the characters, you pick your ism, which is like, do you want it to play like Street Fighter 2 or Street Fighter 3 or Samurai Showdown or Fatal Fury? Very customizable. Fantastic roster, amazing music. Everyone knows that London theme, that True Lovemaking. If you don't know, look it up. True Lovemaking, Capcom vs. SNK 2. And just the roster and like the customization is why this is number 4. This is the game that if you want to play as like Geese Howard versus Bison, or Terry Bogard versus Ken, or like Morgan with her 1994 sprite against Nakaruru, you can. Like, it's just so cool to have these characters against each other. There's little intro animations between the 2 characters, like, Ken throwing Terry his hat, or Zangief and Eagle spinning against each other and smacking hands and sticks. And there's so much personality in this game. And it kind of has like that kitchen sink feel where Capcom just threw a bunch of their older sprites together. They did a fantastic job on the SNK character sprites, but it doesn't really bother me. I kind of like how janky some of those older sprites kind of look in this. And there's some deep cuts for characters, especially in the SNK side, that I really appreciate. Like, it's not just KOF. You have like, Haomaru and, Nakaruru, and it's really great. A lot of hours on this game. Please check it out. There is a chance this may get re-released. The Neo Geo Pocket prequel to this game was re-released. I'm really hoping for this with online playing trophies. Please, Capcom and SNK, make it happen. This game needs to come back. By the way, weird cover image characters for this. Kim from SNK, pretty famous character, like maybe in the top 10 KOF characters, but an odd one to have instead of Terry Mai or like, Ori or Iori or Kyo. But hey, Kim's cool. But like Kyosuke from Project Justice and Rival Schools, who looks like he's like 40 years old on the cover. I never got over that. Like, I played this game originally before I played Rival Schools, and I was like, who's this guy? And when you get in the game, he's a deep cut character. He is kind of like the number 2 guy from Rival Schools. He's kind of like Batsu's like stylish but nerdy friend, Kyosuke. And I'm like, why is he on the cover? He's great in the game. But like at initial glance, you'd think you'd have like Ryu and Ken. No. A Rival Schools character in his last playable appearance. Please bring back Rival Schools, Capcom. But yes, Capcom vs. SNK 2. I could spiel about this one all day too. Check it out. Xbox, PS2, maybe GameCube, or PS3 download. Fantastic game. Moving along, we're in the top 3. God, I love these games. So, this one was tough. This is a game that I played many years ago. Loved it, but in the last couple years have refound my love for it. This game would probably be at number 10 if you asked me a few years ago, but it is now shot up to number 3 because it just came out with rollback netcode on the PS4, and I've been getting a lot of matches in, and I just can't stop. I think about this game all the time, and that is Garo, Mark of the Wolves, also known as Fatal Fury, Mark of the Wolves. Yes, so what is this fantastic classic? Well, this is the last of SNK's Fatal Fury series, yeah. The game is known as Garo, which means wolf. In other territories, it was originally released on the Dreamcast in the US, and that's the version I played first, as Fatal Fury, Mark of the Wolves. And then in all later releases, it was given its original title, Garo, Mark of the Wolves. And yeah, this game came out in 1999 as kind of SNK's answer to Third Strike. And, you know, originally I'd say I liked Third Strike more, but now it's real nebulous. I go back and forth all the time between these two. But I must say, if you want to see some of the smoothest animation in 2D fighting games, you have to play this one. This game was, of course, like I said, released on the Dreamcast, but now you can get it anywhere else. Well, it was originally released on the Neo Geo, but you know, for those who don't want to spend $5,000 on a game, you can. It came out on the Dreamcast, the PS4, the Xbox 360, the Xbox One. It is widely available now, so please check it out. What you see here in front of you, of course, are another set of limited run games that I was able to get for myself. That is, you know, it was released in limited quantities. I got the Neo Geo box on the PS4 as well as the regular release because I love this game that much. I triple dipped on it. But what it is the future of the Fatal Fury series. So it was set about 10 years after Fatal Fury 3, and it kind of stars the cast of that. The cast of that game's Fatal Fury 3's progenitors, kind of their offspring, their trainees, their children, their relatives, except for Terry Bogard. Terry Bogard comes back in his stylish brown like leather aviator jacket and his long blonde hair. It was ballsy to get rid of his cap and his his cut off sleeves with the star on his back, but it works. I love the way Terry looks in this game. He's my main, and yeah, this game has a small roster. I believe 14 if you count the bosses, and they're, like I said, they're all kind of related to characters from KOF and Fatal Fury, kind of like Ryo Sakazaki's or Sazaki's student, like Kushnu Butt, is playable in this, and he plays similar to him. Like Blue Mary's relative / cousin Kevin Ryan is in this game. You know, you have Andy Bogart and Mai Shiranui's student in this game. So the roster is all kind of like the future of that universe, and man, it's fantastic. It's a one-on-one 2D fighter. And keep in mind, the Neo Geo came out in 1990. It was kind of billed as a 24-bit system. It's more powerful than a 16. 24-bit, I've read, is kind of a stretch. But they really pushed this machine. Almost 10 years after it came out, this game was released. And while it's not technically as proficient in Third Strike in some areas, the smoothness of what they were able to get out of this machine, out of the original Neo Geo, still looks good to this day. Hits feel solid. They sound good. The game is responsive. There's fantastic systems like the Just Defense system, which is similar to the parry system from Street Fighter 3. This game is so much fun, even with its small roster. The music sounds good. All on a system that came out around the same era of the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. This game holds up. And I cannot stop playing it. This game about a year or so ago got rollback netcode on the PS4, and while it's hard to find a match on occasion because of the dwindling audience, when I find it, it's solid, it's fun, it's fantastic. If you have not tried this, if you are a SNK fan, if you're a fighting game fan, if you like good 2D games or just good games in general, check out Garo, Mark of the Wolves on your system of choice. PS4, Xbox One, Xbox 360, Dreamcast. If you have $10,000, get the original Neo Geo cartridge. But yes, check it out. That is my number 3 favorite fighting game of all time. Ostensibly, like I said. That one's a little nebulous with Third Strike, but right now it's number 3. And now we're talking about a game that, except for number 1, I've put more time into than any other fighting game. It's one of the games I've put the most time into maybe in my whole gaming library, we're talking about the Soul Calibur series. And guess which one I'm talking about? This is the fan favorite. Yeah, I'm talking about Soul Calibur 2. Not just one version, I'm talking all three. So I love Soul Calibur. I was a Dreamcast kid, so of course I loved Soul Calibur 1. And, you know, I could not wait for Soul Calibur 2. I had an original Xbox. This was in 2000, I believe 2003 this came out. I was a huge comic head back then. I loved Spawn ever since the Spawn movie came out in 97. I had read the comics. So when I saw they were putting Spawn in the Xbox version, that's the version I originally opted for. And I believe I would have been 14 at the time. And to this day, so many years later, I still regularly play this. There are a couple versions of this, as you can see. There was the Xbox, PS2, and GameCube release. There was later an HD version released on the PS3 and Xbox 360, very late in those systems' life cycles. That's the version I would recommend over the others. But yeah, if you don't know, Soul Calibur is Tecmo's weapon-based fighter. As much as Tekken is a hand-to-hand fighter, Soul Calibur is weapon-based. And it's a deep, fun, fast fighting game. You can get in there and just kind of mash at first, and that'll get you through like a few matches. But there's a lot of depth here. And why I picked Soul Calibur 2 over the others is, of course, a little bit of nostalgia. But 2 was the last Soul Calibur that didn't care to have any other gimmicks. It's just the fighting in these games. Soul Calibur 3 and 4 were fantastic. But a lot of that game was dedicated to its character creator, which was fun, but I never put much stock into. Soul Calibur 5 is trash, but Soul Calibur 6, the most recent one, is fantastic. I think that might equal this game in terms of sheer competitiveness and compatibility. And I was unsure because it kind of the clash system in that game, where you kind of link up with the other character. I thought that might slow it down. It doesn't at mid or high level play. Check out Soul Calibur 6. Please, if you're hesitating on it, that game is now complete. As far as I know, it is fantastic. But I always come back to Soul Calibur 2. This is the game that I cannot get enough of. All my friends had this. Whatever system you had, this game was huge, at least in my area. GameCube, Xbox, PS2, they were all fantastic versions with exclusive characters to each. Xbox getting Spawn, like I mentioned. PS2 getting Heihachi from Tekken. And GameCube very famously getting Link from Legend of Zelda. And if you get the Xbox 360 or PS3 version today, you get both Heihachi and Spawn. Sadly, no Link, but that was the first time you could play as the two guest characters of Spawn and Heihachi against each other. And this game just has it. Like, it has a great roster from basically every country in the world at the time has, or, you know, many cultures in the world at the time have a representative of different fighting styles. So you have samurais from Japan, you have like an Native American warrior from North America. You have, your Korean fighter, you have your Chinese sword fighter. It is just fantastic. And everyone is very diverse and unique and fun to try. And every one of those characters has multiple weapons. Yes, there is a story/campaign mode in this game where you kind of go through and fight a bunch of very specific battles, like, your enemy is invisible or the floor is lava. And as you progress through that, you unlock new weapons for each character that do different things. So if you want to get wacky and don't want to play with the default weapons, how about an invisible weapon or a super long extendable weapon, or a weapon that drains your health or regenerates health or regenerates on swing? A lot of customization for some wacky matches. By the way, I know most people hate Necrid. I don't mind Necrid, maybe because I was a Spawn fan, but Necrid was a cool character originally created by Todd McFarlane. My main was Nightmare, followed up by Taki and Mitsurugi. I love this game. So much fun. It's fast. The music's fantastic. The stages are good. So please, check this out. I hold this game near and dear to my heart. That's Soul Calibur 2. Man, I put so many hours into this. Love it. Please, Namco, don't stop with Soul Calibur. If you're done with 6, please let me know that there's a 7 sometime near in the future, because I will never get sick of this game. My soul will always burn. And now we're talking about number 1. You probably know what this is if you know me, and I know this is a very popular pick, but I just can't get enough of this game, and I hope to see more of it in the future, and that is Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Yes, the GOAT. Where's Marvel at? Marvel at right here. And yeah, what you're seeing in front of you are 3 physical versions of the game that I have. That is the Dreamcast version, the PS2 version, the Xbox version. There was also a HD version on the PS3 and 360 that were pulled, sadly, a few years ago, so you can't get those anymore. So these are your only ways to get them if you don't have them now. There was also and I have this, and I'll bring it up in a future video, a PS3 pseudo-physical release where they sold you a box of the game with the code inside of it. It's kind of sought after now, but regardless, the version that I played the most and the version I prefer is still the Dreamcast version. Most people will tell you that the Dreamcast version is better because, I don't know, it runs a frame faster or some other specific reason on the Dreamcast as opposed to even the arcade version. And yeah, I kind of feel a little bit more responsiveness out of this version of the game. And I got to tell you, I got this game in a very weird way. I remember I was a kid with the Dreamcast, I guess in 2000, I would have been around 11 years old. And I wanted Marvel vs. Capcom 1. I had a friend who had it on their Dreamcast, but I never owned it myself, and I couldn't get it for a while. So that birthday, I asked my parents, hey, can I get Marvel vs. Capcom 1? They couldn't find it anywhere. I didn't get Marvel vs. Capcom 1 until a little bit after this game. But they brought me home Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and I was initially upset to have Part 2 instead of Part 1 in my collection. I was weird even like that as a kid. When I started this game, changed my life. I loved Marvel Comics ever since I was a kid. I'm of the generation that grew up with the X-Men cartoon, Spider-Man cartoon, Fantastic Four, Incredible Hulk, all that. And I also grew up around other fighting Capcom games. Like I, of course, liked Mega Man and Street Fighter 2 had been around so much as I was a kid. I never got into them as much into Street Fighter until after I started playing this game. Marvel vs. Capcom, I just remember in the original Dreamcast version, you must unlock the characters. It starts with a slightly small roster of characters, and as you play, you earn points to buy them in a shop. And I could not believe that every time I bought a character, there was another one, and then another one. I thought maybe it would be 5 or 6. No, there's like 20 or 30. I'm like, oh, another Wolverine, Sabretooth, like another version of Wolverine, like Shuma Garath, like Akuma. Like there were so many characters like Servbot, like just unlocking throughout this. A Sentinel, the Juggernaut, and it just kept going and going until it finally reached that magic number of 56. Yes, there are 56 playable characters in this game, split down the middle between Capcom's best and Marvel's best. And this game is what I immediately think of when I think of fighting game. To this day, every friend I have who's into fighting games, if we can't decide on what to play, we pop in Marvel 2. And it's never dulled. It is a 3 versus 3 fighting game, if you don't know, with incredibly high speed. It's a 4-button fighter as opposed to the prior Marvel 6-button fighter. But there's a depth in this in the assist system where you can call in help from your partners, not just switch with them, but call them in for an attack. And like the combinations, like there's huge, flashy, super moves. And just like that East versus West, like theme of this, I've always loved. It's never really been replicated. Like you have Marvel superheroes, very firmly American, and you have Capcom, a huge Japanese studio, and you feel that like without any malice, like that East versus West, superhero versus superhero, video game and versus video game, because Capcom had made other Marvel video games, of course, in the past. And it's just so much fun to hop in with these characters and beat the tar out of each other at lightning fast speed. If you don't know what you're doing, it's still going to have some fun because it's going to look cool. And, the future Marvel vs. Capcom games, like 3 was fantastic, but it was more Avengers focused. I'm an X-Men guy. I'm a 90s kid, so of course, I wanted more X-Men. They were voiced mostly by their voice actors in the American cartoon, and that just, I loved it. I loved some of the deep cuts. You can have like Cyclops, Wolverine, Psylocke, Storm, so on and so forth, like Colossus, just beat the tar out of other characters. And while I love the Marvel 3 Capcom side, of course, like Dante and Amaterasu and Beautiful Joe, like just like, some of the deeper cuts in here, like Hayato, like I love, this introduced me to other Capcom games, like Star Gladiator, and Strider and Plasma Sword, and this game kind of made me get into Marvel Comics more. I'm like, who's Shuma Garath? Let me look it up. And got me into more Capcom games. I'm like, let me play a little bit more Street Fighter. Let me get more into that and other fighting games. Like, let me get into Street Fighter Alpha, which I hadn't really touched before this. And yeah, just the music, it doesn't fit, but then it does, until it does, which is such a weird contradiction. Like, it has smooth jazz, but I am sure if you're watching this up to this point, this music, it's playing in your head, those horns. Every fighting game YouTuber usually has at least one video with like Marvel vs. Capcom 2 music in the background because it's just synonymous with the game. You hear like that one saxophone beat or like that yeah in the beginning, So the music that doesn't fit, then it fits and then it's part of the game and you wouldn't have it any other way. Marvel vs. Capcom 2, it's not balanced. I don't care. Are there technically better fighting games? Sure. Are there fighting games with better rosters? Yeah. Does this game get talked about too much? No, it doesn't. Because I want this game to come back in HD form with online play again. But if I don't, I can always go back to these versions, particularly my beloved Dreamcast version, and play it. And I'll be playing this game until I'm 100 years old and dust in the ground 1,000 years from now. So yeah, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, my favorite fighting game of all time, one of my favorite games of all time. If you haven't played this GOAT, please go and check it out any way that you can. And that's going to do it for today. Thank you for joining me, my fighting game fans, on this long journey where I talk about some of my favorite games of all time. If you've liked what you've seen, please let me know in the comments. If you don't, please let me know in the comments. I'm working on making some of these videos a little bit more high quality, thinking of putting game footage over my discussion. It's a bit of work. I'm going to go back and hopefully retroactively do that to videos like this and others. So please let me know if you want to see that. I'm going to do it one way or the other, but let me know. Just letting you know that is something I'm working on. And I'm also going to be doing more games on fighting, videos on fighting games. I want to do a video game on my personal history with fighting games because I have a long history with them. I want to talk about individual series, like I said. I want to do another countdown, maybe 20 through 11. I know it's weird to do 10 through 1, but I wanted to give you a sense of who I am as a fighting game fan, what I like, and just a general discussion on why I love this genre so much, and I'm glad to see it flourish over the last couple of years, and I want to see it keep growing. Street Fighter V has a rival schools character coming out very soon in the form of Akira. Can't wait for that. Just wanted to mention that. Super hyped for that. Please let me know, what is your favorite fighting games? What do you think of these fighting games? If you've liked what you've seen, please subscribe. This is something I've wanted to do for a while. My name is Mike. This is Chip Damage. Why do you think I call it Chip Damage? Because I love fighting games and I win way too many by Chip Damage. Thank you, Iceman, in Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Have a great night. Take care of yourselves, and I'll catch you later.